Hello there, this is L24 Breaking News, and coming up next. UK sees first death of person with Omicron as government warns of wave of cases. USA tornadoes death toll rises as state assesses damage with at least more than 100 people were killed. After a month of instability, Tunisian President Kais Saied stated he would call a constitutional referendum next year. Hello again and welcome. Starting from Algeria, where the country achieved a trade surplus for the first time in 7 years of constitutional defeat. The Algerian Prime Minister of Finance, Ayman Ben Abdulrahman, in yesterday's tour announced this new record surplus of $1.040 billion in the trade balance of the country during the past month, describing the figure as a dream after Algeria's non-hydrocarbon exports exceeded the barrier of $4.5 billion at the end of last November for the first time in the country's history.
On this occasion, I would like to present to you some of the numbers that Algeria achieved with the President's tight management strategy. We achieved a record number and a large trade surplus at the end of November in the national economy, estimated at $1.040 billion. The percentage of exports outside the hydrocarbon sector reached $1.5 billion, and this is happening for the first time in our national economy.
The Tunisian President Kais Saied has called for a constitutional referendum in July, a year today after seizing broad power in what is criticism a coup. Islam said on what follow.
During a speech broadcast on Tunisian TV, Kais Saied has called for political changes, mainly a constitutional poll, which would be held on the 25th of July next year, following an online public consultation starting next month.
We will organize a popular consultation on the 1st of January. The preparations have already started.
Such step was expected since he suspended parliament and dismissed the prime minister and became in charge of the executive authority after years of economic stagnation and political paralysis. Tunisia's ability to fix an urgent financial crisis has grown more concerns, especially after the delay which took Kais Saied to name a new premier. The survey date coincides with Tunisia's Republic Day and the anniversary of his unpredicted intervention, which has called into question Tunisia's democratic improvements since the Arab Spring breakout in 2011. Saied removed most of the 2014 democratic constitution, in which he said during a period of exceptional measures, and promised a dialogue on further changes. During his Monday speech, he stated that Parliament would keep on hold until Tunisians vote for an alternative assembly on 17 December 2022.
I hereby announce the organization of legislative elections, God willing, according to the new electoral law, on the 17th of December 2022.
Saied added that he would assign a committee of experts to draft a new constitution to be ready by June ahead of the referendum.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has accepted a recommendation that no U.S. military personnel be disciplined for war drone strike in Kabul that killed 10 civilians, including an Afghan employee of an American aid organization and 7 children, as the war in Afghanistan came to a chaotic end this summer. According to the Pentagon, the decision means there will be no disciplinary action take over the strike, which Pentagon officially initially defended before going to call it tragic mistake as a result of execution error. The death toll are still moving forward, and damages caused by the tornadoes in the United States are surging, and reconstruction efforts are expected to last until next year. More with Nabi Khazini.
At least 88 people across 5 U.S. states died and more than 100 are unaccounted for.
The damage is worse than some of the stuff I've seen in war pictures. So it's pretty intense.
Around 52 tornadoes reported across 9 states between Friday night and early Saturday morning, unusual for December in the United States.
I am totally appalled. The courthouse, the hospital, everything, the churches. It's just unimaginable. I cannot believe it.
One tornado alone followed a frightening long and destructive path of more than 300 kilometers, a record distance of tornado in the U.S.
Warm air in the cool season, middle of the night. This sickens me to see what has happened.
Beyond the cost to human life, the tornadoes left a trail of destruction in their wake that destroyed more than 1,000 homes and shut off electricity and water to thousands.
Our state was hit by at least 4 tornadoes. One stayed on the ground in Kentucky for at least 200 miles, devastating anything in its path. Thousands of homes are damaged, if not entirely destroyed. And it may be weeks before we have final counts on both deaths and levels of destruction.
Relief and reconstruction efforts are expected to run well into 2022, and U.S. President Joe Biden said the federal government will do everything to help.
And we still don't know how many lives are lost or the full extent of the damage. But I want to emphasize what I told all the governors. The federal government will do everything it can possibly do to help.
The unusual timing and location of the outbreak is raising questions about the influence of weather and climate change. Record temperatures were recorded Friday in most Gulf Coast states, as well as in the parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky, the seemingly most affected city in the United States.
Arriving from Britain after a G7 foreign minister meeting dominated by tensions with Russia, Blinken met Indonesian President Joko Widodo in the capital Jakarta, made a strong commitment to Indonesian and delivered an address on the U.S. approach to the Indo-Pacific. He also emphasized the importance of the strategic partnership between the two countries and discussed the growing tensions with China in the region.
As the top American diplomat began a tour of Southeast Asia, amid growing tensions with China in the region, Blinken praised Indonesia's leadership in the Indo-Pacific. Blinken's meeting with the Indonesian president, known as Jokowi, the country's foreign minister Retno Marsudi, said Washington appeared interested in forging partnership with Jakarta, including on infrastructure. She also stated that Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a very noticeable commitment to Indonesia.
Secretary Blinken telah melakukan kunjungan kehormatan.
The U.S. Secretary of State delivered a speech in the Indonesian capital about the Biden administration approach, which he says it is important to Southeast Asia in U.S. foreign policy.
We will promote broad-based prosperity. The United States has already provided more than $1 trillion in foreign direct investment in the Indo-Pacific. The region's told us loud and clear that it wants us to do more. We intend to meet that call. At President Biden's direction, we're developing a comprehensive Indo-Pacific economic framework to pursue our shared objectives, including around trade and the digital economy, technology, resilient supply chains, decarbonization and clean energy, infrastructure, worker standards, and other areas of shared interest.
He also will make stops in Malaysia and Thailand during his tour in the region, emphasizing to build alliance with Washington to counter Beijing, which has seen an intensifying competition for influence.
The Indo-Pacific is its own region. Rather, it's about upholding the rights and agreements that are responsible for the most peaceful and prosperous period this region and the world has ever experienced. That's why there's so much concern from Northeast Asia to Southeast Asia, and from the Mekong River to the Pacific Islands, about Beijing's aggressive actions, claiming open seas as their own, distorting open markets through subsidies to its state-run companies, denying the exports or revoking deals for countries whose policies it does not agree with, engaging in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities. Countries across the region want this behavior to change. We do too.
Blinken's visit to Southeast Asia comes less than a week after the US, Canada, and Australia announced a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, citing human rights abuses by the Chinese government, including the treatment of Muslim Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region.
Four Dutch parties reached a coalition deal on Monday, bringing an end to negotiations from government in the Netherlands. The decisions paved the way for Mark Rutte to serve a fourth term as Prime Minister. The Netherlands were to pause in March 2021. The 9 months without a government is the longest time in the country's history it has gone without any government. China warns US after the latter imposed human rights sanctions on Chinese people and entities, including an artificial intelligence company, SenseTime. More in the following.
The United States imposed new extensive human rights restrictions on Chinese people and institutions. As a result, China warned the US that any reckless action will be met with retaliation, pressuring the US to lift its recent penalties. As a result, China warned the US that any reckless action will be met with retaliation, pressuring the US to lift its recent penalties on people and institutions tied to Beijing human rights violations. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry Wang Wenbin, the penalties are evil deeds. These sanctions are the most recent in a succession of steps coinciding with Biden's two-day virtual summit on democracy, during which he unveiled initiatives to consolidate democracy around the world and support pro-democracy legislation in the States. Meanwhile, Wang criticized the recent democracy summit organized by the US, claiming that Washington cannot declare whether a country is democratic or not based on its own criteria. A Chinese artificial intelligence business, SenseTime, was sanctioned after it was accused of developing face recognition technologies that can discern a target's ethnicity with a focus on ethnic Uyghurs. According to the UN, over 1 million individuals, predominantly Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, have been detained or imprisoned in camps in Xinjiang in recent years. Although China denies human rights violations in Xinjiang, the US government and several human rights organizations claim that Beijing is conducting genocide there. The spokesman also criticized the fines imposed on SenseTime, claiming that the decision was made on the basis of lies and misleading information.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that one person has died by the Omicron coronavirus variant in the United Kingdom, the first confirmed death globally from the transmissible variant. Zara Farjani clarified.
The British authorities announced the first death caused by the Omicron variant. Since the first Omicron cases were detected on November 27th in Britain, more than 1,500 new cases were recorded. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has imposed tougher restrictions, stressing that the variant could overcome the immune defences of those inoculated with 2 shots of vaccines.
Omicron spiking now in London and some other parts of the country. Here in the capital, it probably represents about 40% of the cases. By tomorrow, it'll be the majority of the cases, and it's increasing the whole time. And sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalizations, and sadly, at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognize the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
World Health Organization warned that the new variant is a significant global risk. However, data on its severity is still unclear.
If you've had a prior infection or you've had vaccination, we would expect you to have less severe disease. However, the sheer weight of numbers that look like are coming towards us with the Omicron infection means that it will find those people who are unvaccinated or who've had a poor response to the vaccine for their underlying immune condition. And that will still mean that we will still see individuals in hospital.
Scientists also warned that the number of deaths from the variant may range between 25,000 and 75,000 by the end of next April. They also reached a new study that suggests mixing the vaccines AstraZeneca and BioNTech does not give the desired result to confront the Omicron variant, and that this mixture produces low levels of antibodies against it, which increases the risk of infection with the virus. The participants in the research consider that this data will help developing vaccines.
And to have a clear idea about this first death in UK and the new variant, joining me live via Skype, Mr. Ahsan Ajib, who is a PhD researcher at Aston University in Birmingham. First of all, Mr. Ahsan, how the UK government is facing what is called by doctors the fourth waves of COVID-19, and how the people react to the first death situation by the new variant?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Abdurrahim. Well, as has been noted just now, that at least one person has been recorded to have died with the Omicron variant, and the cases was reported yesterday by the Prime Minister, and the spread is now spiking all over the country, from London to other places of the country, and it might even be more than it is really recorded, because of the variant can only be detected through the PCR testing. The numbers now show that 20% of the new cases are about Omicron variant, and the fact that the number can be more than this. What the government is trying to do now is to introduce tougher restrictions and to have people sign up for their boosting jabs, and it is indeed, as we mentioned earlier through the report by the Prime Minister, a case has been recorded death by the new variant. The new rules.
I'm sorry to cut your train of thoughts, but in yesterday's Football Club Manchester United announced via web statement that the postponing of today's game against Brentford due to the COVID-19 cases discovered positively with the team staff. This big clump. So, do you think, and based on this letter, can we expect another game's cancellation due to this COVID spreading again?
Yes, indeed, that is also probable, because the Premier League board decided to postpone this match due to the registration of the outbreak of the COVID-19 within the Manchester United squad, and because they're following the health and safety guidance to keep the people safe, they had to postpone this. And I understand that it might be upsetting for some of the fans, but we would be expecting other cancellations in the future as well, because you see, the rearrangement of the match details has not been published yet. But the people who are looking forward to attend the match can also use their own tickets, the previous ones. But yes, we would expect other cancellations in the future. There's only one thing that I would like to mention about the new restrictions, which is really new, which is the COVID, the NHS COVID pass, which will be mandatory starting from tomorrow. So people entering certain venues will be required by law to provide evidence that they have been vaccinated twice, and this can be reviewed later on. And also, if they are entering like big crowded places, they need also to have a lateral flow test before entrance as well, proving that they have negative results.
Mr. Ahsan Ajib, a researcher, PhD researcher in UK, thank you so much for your clarification. To a different matter now, the Norwegian Institute of Public Health said restrictions must be imposed, otherwise the country will risk seeing up to 3 million people infected with COVID every day. The dire warning has prompted Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre to announce the country will further tighten restrictions later this week in order to limit the spread of COVID-19. Denmark is the second worldwide only to the UK's confirmed cases of Omicron, with both countries having extensive sequencing of samples to detect variants quickly. Denmark has recorded a total of 3,437 Omicron cases as of one day, while Norway recorded a total of 955 cases of the variant as of Sunday. South Korea witnessed its deadliest day of pandemic. A Delta variant spread and caused May to die while waiting for beds in hospital. Health experts warn that the country's medical system is at breaking point and that the government continue to be slow and caution in enforcing social distance. Fatalities could rise. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, 94 victims died in just 24 hours, with a total of 906 in critical condition. This year, Xinjiang, a key Chinese manufacturing province, is combating its first COVID-19 cluster, with tens of thousands of individuals in quarantine and virus-affected areas suspending business activities. reducing flights and cancelling events in China's northern port city of Tianjin. Health officials reported the country's first case of Omicron coronavirus strain. To a different matter now, Human Rights Watch said the Zionist law enforcement agencies used violence to disrupt peaceful protests by Palestinians in Al-Quds during civil unrest in the city in May 2021. Human Rights Watch in July and October interviewed 10 law residents in prison and conducted analysis and geolocalization of several video clips filmed between May and 14th, the 10th and the 14th of May, and published on social media. The evidence indicated that the authorities responded to the events in discriminatory manner. Magnitude 7.3 undersea earthquake caused panic in Indonesia after the alert left announced by the Indonesian government. The earthquake struck off Flores Island. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the quake hit at the depth of 18.5 kilometers under the sea and was located 112 kilometers north of the town of Mayomer. A report backed by the United Nations and commissioned by Bogota Mayor Claudia Lopez was released yesterday. The report accused the Colombian police forces of using excessive violence and violation of human rights during September riots in the country. The report also accused the police forces of killing over dozens of civilians. Usama Iyadi clarified on what followed.
An investigation backed by the UN found that the Colombian police forces are responsible for what it called a massacre. The 177-page investigation held by Chief Investigator Carlos Negred accused the Colombian police of killing 11 people in anti-police violence riots. The mayor of Bogota, Claudia Lopez, asked for the investigation after the act that she considered one of the most serious episodes of violations against human rights in the history of the city, describing what happened to be police abuse and state crime. The investigation determined that the massacre occurred due to the absence of political and operational order not to use firearm against civilians. Riots in Bogota erupted after footage of police forces tasering law student Javier Ordonez for breaking COVID-19 restrictions, as he died few hours after he was tasered. The report said that brutality and intensive violence against September 9th riots was a serious violation of human rights. It is worth mentioning that earlier this year, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights accused the Colombian security forces of using disproportionate and excessive force against protesters demonstrating against a series of social issues, including income inequality and police violence on the population.
A former Danish minister was found guilty of illegally splitting asylum-seeking couples in which one of the partners was under the age of 18. On Monday, Angus Tejburg was found guilty and sentenced to 60 days in prison in a re-impeachment hearing. According to the court, the former minister had intentionally or through gross negligence ignored her ministerial obligations. Tejburg was also found guilty of submitting incorrect or misleading information to Parliament, and this order was determined to be violation of Danish law and the European Convention on Human Rights. The 42nd GCC summit and the first since Al-Ula agreement, which led blocking Gulf countries to restore ties with Qatar. This would conciliate the rapprochement between Qatar and formerly boycotting states. The details in what follow.
The 42nd meeting of the six-member Gulf Cooperation Council Summit is expected to consolidate the rapprochement between Qatar and formerly boycotting states. According to experts, this would deepen ties after the historical Al-Ula agreement in January. The summit, which takes place on Tuesday in the Saudi Arabian capital, Riyadh, is the first since Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates agreed to end their dispute with Qatar over a range of issues, including its foreign policy, which had led them to severe diplomatic relations with Doha in June 2017. The four blockading countries signed the Al-Ula Declaration during the 41st GCC summit in January, opening a new chapter based on greater cooperation with the Council. The summit coincided with talks between Iran and world powers aimed at salvaging the landmark nuclear agreement signed in 2015. The agreement, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, lifted sanctions on Tehran and imposed curbs on its nuclear program. Oman, Kuwait and Qatar have maintained ties with Tehran, whose relationships with Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the UAE have remained strained, but recent de-escalation efforts have leveled some of the differences vis-à-vis Iran.
Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, has been named Times Magazine Person of the Year for an incredible year in which he jockeyd for the title of world's richest person and made his Twitter account a must-read while moving the needle on climate change, cryptocurrencies, space exploration and universal broadband. Elon Unbound was the year of 2021. SpaceX won NASA's exclusive contract in April to land American astronauts on the moon for the first time since 1972. A car with a Serbian license plate carrying migrant crashed into a house, leaving 11 people killed and 4 injured. The incident took place late on December 30th in the southern village of Marahulum when the driver of the car refused to stop for police check and tried to escape in a high speed. Coming back now to sport, the carefully crafted sense of stability around English football began to crumble on Monday night after a record number of positive COVID-19 tests, with Manchester United today's game at Brentford called off and the possibility of more postpones to come. 42 Premier League players and officials tested positive for the virus in the 7 days that ended Sunday. Manchester United are among the teams affected, with the club announcing on Monday evening that the away game at Brentford had been cancelled following the PCR confirmation of positive left COVID-19 test among the first team staff and players. The outbreak requires ongoing surveillance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. UK sees first death of person with Omicron as a government warns of wave of cases. USA tornadoes death toll rises as states assess damage, with at least more than 100 people were killed. After a month of instability, Tunisian President Kais Saied stated he would call a constitutional referendum next year. That's all what we have for now. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care. Peace be upon you.